The entity in which they invest, another firm has also invested in this, which is managed by Vinod Adani. So that is where the whole connection. So, when you are at a very high regulatory position, it calls for making very clear such disclosures.
Right.
So these disclosures she had ample opportunity to make.
What kind of questions do these revelations raise, or is it that probably too much is being made out of something that's not maybe too significant? What's your reading from your observations over the last few days?
Yeah, just to add to what Sandeep had said, one thing which I see very clearly is that which the Supreme Court appointed, expert committee, which had 6 members, including K.V. Kamath and Nandan Nilekani and Somashekhar Sundaresan and O.P. Bhatt. Some of these big people of high reputation. What it said was this: that SEBI has been investigating this issue since October 2020. And SEBI chairperson Madhabi Bucha has been in SEBI since 2017. She became the chairperson in 2022. So as Sandeep pointed out, whatever has happened, whatever we are talking about, it is co-terminus. The probe into Adani, allegations which Hindenburg made of, recent stock market manipulation as well as accounting fraud by the Adani Group, which Adani Group has consistently maintained that these are all baseless. So these were co-terminus, SEBI's probe and her tenure in SEBI. So what was SEBI actually probing? SEBI was probing violation of securities laws, which mandate that 25% holding in listed companies should be held by public shareholders, right? So amongst these many public shareholders, there were 13 overseas entities, 12 FPIs and one more overseas entities, which suspects or allegations are that the promoters of Adani Group are linked with some of these entities. Then essentially what it means that is that the promoter or public shareholding is less than 25, could be less than 25%, hence in contravention of securities laws. So this is what SEBI is probing.
Right.
Admittedly, SEBI says that they have not been able to get a handle on this probe. It is very difficult. Some of these all of these entities are in offshore locations, Bermuda, Mauritius, etc., etc. Getting information is very difficult. In all this, in one of the structures of one of these 13 entities, comes Madhuri Puri Buck and Dhaval Buck's investments.
Right.
And the entity in which they invest, another firm has also invested in this, which is managed by Vinod Adani. So that is where the whole connection, but the two kind of two people together. Now this is for anybody with, if all these revelations are true, and Madhavi Puri Book hasn't specifically denied in her statements that these investments were not made. She doesn't say that. She says in her statements that these investments have been disclosed. But if these are true, then there is a conflict of interest issue. Conflict of interest can arise. In many cases, it does arise. But these are always read into the appointments of the regulators. So, say for instance, she says about that, when her husband Dhaval Book was appointed as senior advisor in Blackstone, she says that it was read into her appointment that she would recuse herself, right? And the SEBI statement also says that she recused herself, and she also says she recused herself. But it is not very clear. But the granular details of the investment that she and her husband made in this particular offshore, Mauritius-based offshore fund, whether it was disclosed that Adani had also invested in this fund, Adani through another entity, and hence raises the conflict of interest. So, when you are at a very high regulatory position, it calls for making very clear such disclosures.
Right.
So these disclosures she had ample opportunity to make. She probably could have made it at to the SEBI board. She could have made it. See, these are also required to be made in public, because now there are issues about people having invested in Adani stocks, people having lost. All this case that was going on in Supreme Court. She had an opportunity to tell this to the Supreme Court. She had an opportunity to tell this to the expert committee appointed by the Supreme Court. So whether these disclosures were made, and at what point were they made? So these are the questions of conflict of interest that arise from this.
But what should be the expectation that investors, public at large, and journalists like us should have now from SEBI? Should SEBI now proactively come out and make public the disclosures that had been made by the SEBI chairperson, or is it now?
So always in such cases, the first step is disclosures and complete disclosures and voluntary disclosures. Uh, Also, whether first is this disclosure, and second whether she had recused herself from that, from deciding on, or from investigations related to these 13 overseas entities. So whether she had recused herself, because if you look at it, the Supreme Court also in its June, when it kind of dismissed an appeal. The plea was that that there be a court monitored probe. Let the probe be handed over to CBI. But then the Supreme Court said, it dismissed this plea, and it said that there is huge confidence, high confidence in SEBI as the regulator, and let it probe. So had Supreme Court been completely aware of all that Hindenburg raises questions on today, would it have taken the same call? Would it have said that let SEBI go ahead and do it? Or would it have said that SEBI chairperson could probably recuse herself from Adani related investigations? So these are questions that are coming up, and of course, as you said, first is to make those disclosures.